Takže dobré odpoledne, dámy a pánové.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you after a short break. I hope you are full of energy before the last session of today, which will be dedicated to auditing and transparency in public procurement. We will try to look at it from various perspectives, and we have several speakers here. But before inviting the other speakers, I'd like to ask the chair of the Anti-Monopoly Office, Mr. Mlsna, to come to the stage. Good afternoon once again. Thank you very much that you accepted our invitation. Just in terms of the context in the Czech Republic, in Czech Republic we have administrative review, not court review, and Mr. Mlsna is the head of the organization that reviews the procedures of contracting authorities in public procurement. Last year, at the event organized by the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs, we talked about the fact that the number of cases in compliance with Section 6, Paragraph 4 of the Act on Procurement was not so high. I'd like to ask whether the situation changed, whether the number of cases was higher, and in what fields these cases were related to. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to this conference after a year to welcome all of you. Regarding your question, I have to say that the number of cases regarding to Section 6, Paragraph 4 has not increased. Last time I mentioned 2 cases. One was related to waste management in Třinec city, where the contracting authority introduced a Euro standard for electric vehicles for waste collection. Then we had other 2 cases, one on alternative filling of the cartridges for copying machines. That was a framework contract. It was a procedure where there were complaints from the petitioner who said that it's not green enough, and he tried to outline an ideal alternative for tender specification that should be there. The proposal was rejected. What is covered in paragraph 28 is actually not exhaustive list. So it is always up to the contracting authority how they prepare the tender specifications. And the second message is that the Anti-Monopoly Office is not here in order to order contracting authority what responsible or green solution is. It is up to the contracting authority to take into consideration the needs they think are important, even though we think that the tender specification could be more innovative or greener. The primary responsibility is up to the contracting authority. And the second case, there is still not a final and conclusive decision. So just general remarks, the contracting authority procured innovative solutions for waste bins that would sensorically enable to report the extent to which the bin is filled. And then the petitioner argued that the contracting authority should have taken more into account the life cycle issues, the energy efficiency of this solution, and so on. However, it is still pending, but it's the truth that contracting authorities selected a certain or have gone for a certain innovative solution, and even though we can think it is not innovative enough, it is not our role to tell them. So it is at the discretion of the contracting authority. Thank you very much. And apart from the fact that last year there was a discussion on the decision-making practice, we also mentioned the cooperation of your institution with educational facilities, also signed some memoranda with selected universities, and you also mentioned cooperation with the faculties of law and economy in matters of competition. I'd like to know whether similar cooperation is also developed in other fields, whether you continue in the current cooperation, and also whether there were some new cooperations with universities that have specializations such as public administration, where teaching on public procurement could be very beneficial. Thank you very much for the question regarding competition. I have to mention it because it is also on our auspices. The cooperation worked quite well before even I joined the office. We have cooperation with Masaryk universities. We have internships for the future job seekers. Of course, competition is, I would say, more dynamic and vivid topic, especially if you do some local investigations. But regarding public procurement, the new semester started in the Faculty of Law, and we have taken over new subject called public procurement. It will be taught in 2 semesters. We'll start in winter semester, and the first part will be on some basic introduction, general issues, and the next one we will deal with individual cases, case law. And we agreed with the Masaryk University that we will be able to provide that with our staff. There is actually no other possibility how to attract the people who would like to work in this field in the future. We don't have many in general in our country, so we actually want to train the undergraduates and to inform them about this possibility. So the cooperation is quite good and intense. And I would also like to remind the issue of public administrations. We do not have prestigious schools for public administrations, but are there any demands from universities asking you to organize a seminar on that so that you would inform the future heads of social departments? The advantage of the law faculty of Masaryk University is that they combine 2 study programs. One is the classical law and legal science, and one bachelor program on public administration. So public administration course can be attended by students from both the programs. Regarding other universities or actually faculties. We also have established cooperation with the Faculty of Economy and Public Administration, where we also teach not only competition, but also public procurement, and we would also like to launch a new program at the Faculty of Law of Masaryk University. This is my alma mater. And now, different subject. When I inspect the annual report on the state of play of public procurement in the last year, apart from the fact that there is quite a positive message that the case law is not so formalistic, but is more rational. I think it is a positive message. It also talks about the fact that more complicated cases that place higher demands on technical issues. I'm not speaking only about sustainability, but technical issues in general. In this context, it occurred to me whether the Section 6, Paragraph 4, triggered a new challenge for your anti-monopoly office. Does it place higher demands on specialization, professionalizations in public procurement? I might have answered that in the first question already, because we actually decided on only 2 cases that related to Section 6, Paragraph 4 out of, let's say, 100 cases, which is quite a small number. What is a trend today? The more complicated cases focus on more technical details. The cases that were adjudicated on the Act from 2016 are already closed, but today we deal with issues related to ICT and all cases under Section 29. So we are able to manage this in terms of our capacities, because we already have some experience, but occasionally we need to hire a forensic expert.
You have actually answered my 4th question concerning whether around the ideal combination of legal and economic, to understand both legal and economic aspects of the tender. But it would be probably the investment which would not have sufficient added value. I would say it's in general, also in case of the buyers. Of course, to have just one particular buyers focusing on the Section 6, Paragraph 4, it wouldn't make much sense. Even this small piece of the legislation, of course, it's the most important part of today's discussion, and nevertheless, the use of innovative solutions for many of the buyers doesn't make much sense in real life. So, what I'm convinced is necessary to try to attract young people who are interested in public procurement and educate them on the ongoing basis. They need, of course, to understand how the particular administrative body works, to also be aware of certain shifts from formalism to the current status, what impact the original approach could have on the public procurement, also to be able to follow the common law of the European Justice Court, etc. You know, this type of people we should be able to attract into the public procurement and, of course, be able to pay them well. Okay, thank you very much for all the answers, and I would like to seize the opportunity, having the chairman of the Anti-Monopoly Office, and before inviting other members of the panel discussions, I would like to ask you if anyone from the audience would like to ask a question to Mr. Mosna. Okay, I can see Martin Hadaš being tempted to ask the question. Unfortunately, I can't hear the speaker.
Dobré odpoledne.
Good afternoon. Chairman, I would like to briefly to ask you, what role could, in your opinion, be played by the Anti-Monopoly Office? How could you influence other review audit bodies like the audit body of the Ministry of Finance and many others? Because for many of the buyers, the public procurement is a very complicated issue, and the decisions of the review and audit office is difficult to predict.
To je velmi zásadní otázka. Já začnu možná příběhem z vlastní praxe, protože
question. I will start with a story from my own life. You probably happen to know I was a deputy minister to the Ministry of Interior, and the audit body of the Ministry for Regional Development has stated that there were no mistakes, and 5 years later I was addressed for committing a mistake and to penalize with the penalty of 10 million Czech crowns. So, this is really quite worrying that audit bodies stipulates no full compliance with all the requirements, and 5 years later there is a change. Once in half a year we have a two-day session with the audit body of the Ministry of Finance. These two-day sessions are quite interesting discussions. As a matter of fact, we are able to speak the same language. We, as the Anti-Monopoly Office, we are trying to evaluate it from a less formal point of view. We are focusing rather if the tender was influenced. Of course, we have to be able to submit evidence to the administrative courts. What we can see from the audit bodies of the Ministry of Finance, they are focusing on formalities. Lots of incentives we receive are from the bodies of state administration. So audit body, for example, is sending us lots of their findings, which we should be, if I am to quantify it, out of 15 out of 15 incentives, we launch an administrative procedure just in one case. So you can see the major difference between the perception of the audit body and the Anti-Monopoly Office. I'm not sure if this is given by the rigidity of the audit bodies or alibism. We are convinced that in case there is any there is an error, fault, mistake, or misdemeanor, we give an incentive to launch a further procedure. But if such a fault is not approved, then of course the audit body of the particular ministry should not limit in any way the financing of the given project. So I understand it's quite complicated, and the discussion at the political level has been led for many, many years. It's not only the audit body of Ministry of Finance, but it's also the Supreme Audit Office.
A nenašel se zatím žádný jednotící
which is evaluating the economy of the economy of the procedure, and it would be great if there is some sort of a hierarchy among all the audit bodies, so that would be very helpful, like having a positive audit report from the Anti-Monopoly Office and two negative audit reports from the audit body of the Ministry of Finance and other the Supreme Audit Court. So thank you very much for the answer. If there are no additional questions, Martin has actually asked a question which I wanted to expand on during the discussion. Nevertheless, now I would like to invite other members of this panel discussion. It's a great honor to me to welcome Leona Gerglová-Steigerová, who is the new Deputy Minister of a given section of the Ministry for Regional Development.
Dále zástupkyní Evropské komise paní.
Then we have the representative of the European Commission, Mrs. Vítězslava Fričová, and last but not least, the non-profit sector, Transparency International, Adam Jareš. Please join me on the stage.
A já bych začal možná tu otázku bych položil.
I would like to ask a question.
Paní Fričovou.
I would like to start with Mrs. Fričová, who originally was active with the Anti-Monopoly Office. Then she left, and she is now within the European Commission, responsible for the audit monitoring of public procurement. And before that, she has also been active with the Department of European Issues at the Senate of Czech Republic. You are to follow and monitor the audit and review mechanisms, their development. Maybe could you somehow summarize on this topic in the field of public procurement? Can you hear me? Well, we have agreed that we will be using the microphone, the hand microphone, because we prefer it, because the hand mics are quite complicated if you have glasses. Thank you very much for invitation. Thank you for the question. What I would like to make precise, within the department of DG GROW, I do follow both the judicature or the case law of the European Court of Justice, but I am also in charge of the network of the review audit bodies of the first level, which are reviewing public tenders in all EU member states. We have a special work group which met last week in Prague, and the chairman of the Anti-Monopoly Office opened the meeting. As for the case law of the European Court of Justice, approving the Directive 2014, even though it's underlined that there is a need to procure in green way, sustainable, innovative way. It was approved by the European Court of Justice back in 2002 that it's possible to use environmental evaluation criteria. Whoever is reading the decision of on Concordia, it is possible to use the green, sustainable, innovative criteria. The reason being the actual functioning of the European Union, the Article 11, of the EU Treaty should be reflected in all policies and strategies and activities of EU. It has to be, of course, reflected also to a certain extent in public tenders, which is one of the activities of EU. That has been, of course, reflected in all the directives 04, 14. The criteria of sustainability can be taken into account in as evaluation criteria, technical criteria, specifications. The directives are very, very similar. It's just being renamed. From the beginning of the millennium, the requirements are more or less the same. The tendency was also approved back in 2020 when in a final decision it was found or approved that the social
to ani dělat nemusel, protože pořád dodržování těchto principů je vysloveno i v těch základních smlouvách, i v primárním právu.
Okay. In my opinion, this was just a confirmation of a trend which is in existence at least from the beginning of the millennium. In the context with the TIM and Article 18, paragraph 2 of the directive. Our directive originally, of course, included all necessary tools with the exception of the Article 87. So we could evaluate all the aspects. We could specify the technical specifications, which, for example, concern, even the environmental management. And then we had the already mentioned Section 5, paragraph 4, which stipulated this as an obligation. My question, focusing or which is meant primarily for the Ministry of Regional Development, is because the legislative framework was criticized for many reasons. Nevertheless, the attempt to eliminate this particular article could be an excessive step. Nevertheless, if the quality of legislation is improved, so this could be very, very helpful. Thus, the Ministry of Regional Development assumes any sort of promotion, any sort of postpone, which could be reflected in decision-making.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not here to defend Section 6, paragraph 4. We all know about all the negatives. You have already mentioned it regarding the wording. The fact is that the Act on Public Procurement is now is to be amended, and it is now being debated in the lower parliament. It should be amended based on the proposals from also the municipalities. We didn't need this section 6, paragraph 4 in order to know that it is possible, but we got into the situation of big concerns of small contracting authorities that are afraid that they would be inspected by official bodies in 2 or 3 years, saying that they insufficiently implemented Section 6, paragraph 4, that they will inspect to what extent they were innovative, for example. I can see that this updated proposal that is trying to rule out the small enterprises from this obligation. Understand that these small public authorities are afraid of these audits and inspections during the subsidy contracts. So this amendment is something we can understand, even though it is not a systemic solution. We can actually agree on that, but it is here. When speaking about local governments, I see quite strongly that there is a situation that when speaking about public procurement, we speak about it when there are some big cases that are medialized. But the debate on Section 6, paragraph 4, is now under discussions, and we have to say that some amendments are motivated by the desire to be transparent enough to prevent frauds in the future. So therefore we will have to need to seek a balance between the punishment of frauds, but also giving more space for contracting authorities so that they could think more strategically about procurement. So we can see not only from the anti-monopoly office saying that they are not here to assess which of the solutions are more or less sustainability, but we can also hear it from the Regional Development Ministry about their opinion about the amendment. So this is a good signal. I'd like to ask Mr. Jaresch, due to the fact that we will have this amendment and there is also the new principle implemented related to procurement. You also deal with openness and transparency in your work. Do you think that this paragraph could bring about some change that could endanger transparency or openness of the procurement process? Thank you for this question. I have to say that we don't think so. Just like the anti-monopoly said, we agree with them. I personally think that Section 6, paragraph 4 is quite positive, in my opinion, even though we also say that before the amendment, the socially responsible procurement was possible. There were some courageous or progressive contracting authorities that were implementing it. However, I think that there are still many contracting authorities who didn't know about it or didn't want to implement it. There were more of them. So it happens in practice that if municipalities do not have to do something by law, they don't do it. So during market consultations, we can hear that even contracting authorities do not want to implement it. So the legislative process was not ideal. The final wording is probably also not ideal, but definitely there will be some change. It will bring about some change, and I think it's quite positive overall, this new principle that was integrated in Section 6, paragraph 4. Thank you. Now, regarding various approach to sustainability in public procurement, be it either in social on environmental area. Also, your office, Mr. Milsner, is in contact, in touch with your foreign partners. I'd like to ask what topics are important in communication with other foreign authorities, and if we do not have a great incidence of cases, do foreign authorities deal with higher incidence of cases? I think it is not related so much to the decision-making practice of the authorities. I believe that the question of socially responsible procurement is about society, whether society sees as important that these goals should be reflected in public procurement, because it is the policy of these contracting authorities to say, yes, we want responsible or green solutions, and if we want it, we want to include the relevant criteria in tender specifications. If we want to do it the Czech style, we say, okay, there is section 6, paragraph 4. We try to somehow implement it so that we don't have problem later with the inspection. So I think that it is also it also depends on the government and the funds that they will be able to release. So if one mandatory precondition for public procurements will be that needs to be environmental or innovative, then the public buyer will have to think about how to achieve the goal. If we proceed as always, which is we have allocated money that they are actually divided into individual structural funds, and we will do it without reflecting these criteria, we will not advance. So it is about a strategic question, political question, and it is not much topic for supervising authorities. I would also like to say that the principle which is integrated now in section 6, paragraph 4, is only one of many principles. There are the principle of transparency, proportionality, and other principles. I don't want you to think that paragraph 4 is more important than any other paragraphs. I think the decision-making bodies of the Anti-Monopoly Office, but also the Court of Justice, agree on that, because the TIM case was about whether to exclude a supplier who have a contractor who had 3 subcontractors, and one of them did not comply with one criteria about employing people with disabilities. So this subcontractor was immediately excluded without giving it a possibility to straighten the problem. So the Court of Justice said, you have implemented the principle of socially responsible procurement, but it is not more important than principle of proportionality. So they apply both to the same extent, and it has to be implemented the same way in all member states. It is necessary to provide the possibility to subcontractors to remedy the situation. So the Anti-Monopoly Office already decided it in 2016. Was one tender on the construction of playground in Kadaň. There was a requirement there was the requirement for the main contractor to comply with the specific requirement on sustainability, but the main contractor was not allowed to pass that obligation on subcontractor. So it had to be decided by the court, and I believe that it is not important important whether it is performed by the main contractor or by one of the subcontractors. So we can't overload ourselves with requirements that are not meaningful. So what is discussed by the authorities? So, for example, changes of obligations regarding various rare metals, and this is something that has been here for over 2 years. We have to say that the Czech Republic has even more stricter legislation than it is required by the EU directives. I remember when Section 222 was adopted, a legislative council where members said if it is not strict enough, then everyone will tend to cheat. So we implemented even more stricter rules, and now we say it is too complicated, it is too strict. So it should be subject to discussion for the future whether we really need such a strict legislation, because it is very difficult for contracting authorities, and especially in the context of post-COVID situation and energy crisis and growing prices and also consequences of the war in Russia. So these are topics that were discussed by review authorities. So we actually also discussed how to apply sanctions against Russia in practice, how to find out that the supplier is on the sanction list, be it either a global or national sanction list. When we speak about Section 6, paragraph 4, it is also important to mention that today, and I think it's a positive message in the field of public procurement, that we do not bid for price primarily here in the country. So usually the criteria are at least 50 to 50%. So there is a combination of price and quality as well. I think this is quite a substantial trend compared to the past, because in the past it was very often the only criteria, just competing for price. So there has been a positive shift in this respect.
Thank you. Maybe let's conclude this introductory part and open another part of the discussion. That's the plurality set of controls, audits and reviews has already been mentioned by the chairman, that at least with the audit body of Ministry of Finance, the communication is ongoing, both of the institutions being independent. These two institutions try to communicate, and I would like to know if you perceive if you think which steps would be ideal, convenient, because it has been discussed several times how the two bodies should cooperate, what should be the next steps, what could support both bodies use the same language, be easily predictable. Maybe Leona have the floor as the first one. Thank you. You know, the prices, bidding for prices, you know, it always sounds nice until you see the real data. Then it really starts to be a pain. But from the point of the audit bodies, review bodies, it's quite obvious where it's still bidded for price. If it's from the funds, usually we have to be a little bit more careful. But nevertheless, what should be the future? When I was getting myself ready for today's panel, I have asked colleagues of mine to see what how we are cooperating, how we educate other bodies, etc. But it's unbelievable. The pressure on formalism, the fear of checks, reviews, audits. It's it's always question of management. The managerial positions have to clearly state what is important within the individual tenders and where we are heading. I think we all feel that under the management of Mr. Mosna, at least that's how I perceive it. It's quite different, the management, since we want to support new trends. I recall discussion on bust value, maybe we don't have all the answers, but if it's viable abroad, then it should be viable in Czech Republic as well. Full stop. If we are to support innovations, again, the management has to support it as well. The auditors are trained for every single section, case law. If they don't understand that the management wants them to be innovative, to follow the modern trends, then it's very difficult for them to know where they should be heading. It's not the difference in perception. We can agree that 6.4 is okay, but if you have everyday audits or reviews, it really is very, very demanding. If I follow the subjective criteria, I'm attacked by a whole range of criteria, and I immediately start to press what I wished for. From my perspective, what is needed for the future, these conferences are considered, these are the talk the talk and walk the walk. We should clearly stay where we should postpone, where we to move, and that's the discussion of anti-monopoly office, Ministry of Regional Development. The independency does not mean to come up with new questions, cast doubt, come with new theories, but the anti-monopoly office clearly proves that we do not want to follow the formalism. We want to solve only serious errors and mistakes. I have to coordinate all the bodies. Even the European Commission is part of it. From the controllers, reviews, auditors, we hear that this is done at the level of the European Commission. So the coordination one level higher. If we have any communication between Brussels and Prague, it seems that somewhere around Frankfurt, it changes the wording, it changes the perception. So I think that even this coordination at a high level is of importance. I'm of the opinion that maybe Mrs. Fričová should respond now. DG GROW is responsible for the legislative framework, but we do not audit the subsidies or individual bits, because we are responsible for the overall framework. So what I am to audit is from the point of Czech legislation, or if we identify any systemic errors because of poor interpretation. So that's what we follow, that's what we audit. So the comment on the audit is focused on other parts of the Commission, but what we should be doing, the audit as such, should be in form of a dialogue. So I do not know how the audited entities respond if the auditor, for example, says that there were any mistakes, and the audited body just says, yes, you're right. So it's difficult to respond to the outputs, and the auditors then actually correct their outputs. If there is a conflict in the legislative explanation, they do ask the DG Grow to interpret the legal framework. So I would say even at the level of EU, there is an effort to come to a conclusion which would not be in conflict with anyone. I have mentioned DG Regio, DG Environment in charge of environmental issues, etc. DG Ample and Regio, they have a special management. They carry out the audits together. At least these two DGs are cooperating, collaborating, and I assume the main target was to have the conclusions, at least in these two fields of activities, unified.
Nedá mi to, abych se neobrátil i na vás, pane předsedo, vy už jste říkal, co se děje, to je auditní orgán.
Mr. Messner, you have already mentioned what's going on concerning the audit body. Can you imagine what could support the harmonization, the unification, which may occur in a period of 2 to 3 years? How we can improve the communication among the individual players? You know, I don't think it's that complicated. Whoever is to be able to stipulate any errors concerning the public procurement, so it's the anti-monopoly office. That's the only body which should declare whether error has been committed or not. Then the audit body of the Ministry of Finance, if they come to a conclusion that legislation has not been complied with, they should submit incentive to the anti-monopoly office. But the question is whether they should not be monitoring only the compliance of the conditions and the legal framework of a particular public tender. In other words, if the particular section of the public procurement law has been complied with. You know, we are quite critical. It's unfair because they are not present here, but I assume the audit body of the Ministry of Finance has been invited to the conference as well. No, they were not. So if you have an interference with the legislation by the audit body, they immediately submit this as an incentive. So the Ministry of Finance gives incentives to the Revenue Office. They say that based on the incentives, nothing has happened and the budget rules were not in conflict. But this is quite absurd. If a body on a lower level is of the opinion that there is no conflict, but the higher level of the management stipulates the conflict, then probably the whole system is wrongly set up. And how to avoid such situations? There could be a synergy of a relationship between the audit body and the anti-monopoly office. Maybe we may require first of all the comment, and then we can review if the legislation has been interfered or not. But you know, coming to a conclusion, it usually takes ages, and that's not taking into account the Supreme Audit Office. And that, of course, is very deterring for many people to be active in a public procurement, because you know there are problems which may arise anywhere, and But nevertheless, this political discussion is going on for a lengthy period of time and has no end. Just imagine, audit body says that there was a error, then the revenue office says there is no error, anti-monopoly office says there is no error. Nevertheless, the decisive body says that you have to return part of the funding. This is absurd. I think that's where we should have a sort of a pressure. Maybe someone from a non-profit organization should say that this is the real existing problem, real issue. It has been mentioned, a small tender in a small municipality in the amount of 5 million Czech crowns. They have the funding from EU funds, and just imagine that the audit bodies find any errors, mistakes, and it's of course for such a mayor, it's very difficult to communicate somehow further with the responsible bodies and administrative bodies. During negotiations with audit authority, we can see that they are really persistent and insisting on complying with the formal rules. I'd like to mention one sanctions proceedings that started yesterday and still pending, and it is the infringement of obligations, because ministry ordered all regional offices to find out whether all municipalities complied with the obligation to publish all the documents. They found out that the contracts were not published on the website, and then the mayors of small municipalities had to pay very high fines of like 100 or 200,000 crowns. So this is very absurd. Instead of reminding them that they need to publish documents, this is really absurd. This is only an administrative obligation that the, let's say, municipalities forgot to comply with, and instead of reminding them to comply with that, we impose a fine. So public administrators are happy because they identify infraction and they imposed a fine. So there are absurd situations, as for example, chapel in a cemetery, reconstruction of this chapel for 2,500,000 crowns in a very small municipality. They forgot to publish contract on the website, and they were imposed a very high fine. So this is really absurd, and we don't want to do that, and we need to have capacity for dealing with really complicated cases based on the merits. Thank you for your answer. You also mentioned the NGO. We speak about the various tools of audit, be it either administrative audit from the anti-monopoly office and also auditing of funds. Can you say something about the possibilities of auditing from the public? You are now preparing a project that is called Pact of Integrity. Can you say a few words about this project? What are the benefits for the public and public contracting authorities? I'd like to go back to what you said about NGOs. We would definitely like to be involved in the discussion, but the government doesn't communicate enough. Back to your question, Pact of Integrity is nothing new. It is a tool that we have had here since the beginning of the 1990s.
And to describe it, I'd like to say that it is actually a cooperation of the contracting authority with civil society to ensure that the bidders and all the stakeholders proceed in compliance with the law, prevent the risk of corruption, and strengthen the confidence of the public in public procurement. There is a contract that is signed based on which the parties declare that they will eliminate any corrupt behavior, increase the transparency of the whole process, including the implementation. And civil sector is also involved in the process as an independent monitor. They supervise the compliance of the procedure with the Pact of Integrity. They can also issue recommendations for increasing transparency of the whole process. And now the practice. Going back to your question, currently we have got further with the Clinical Medicine Institute, where we participated in the contract for the construction of a new Energo Center. This has already been completed. Now we are involved in the constructions of 2 new buildings of ICAM, which is a strategic government investment amounting to more than 1 billion crowns. At the beginning, with this ICAM institutions, we signed a Pact of Integrity, and it also governs the obligation to provide regular information about the project. We are entitled to issue recommendations and obligation to publish reports about the compliance with the Pact of Integrity. The pact was made part of the tender specifications. The participants, the bidders, were obliged to read it and approve it. And then the winner or winning bidder is obliged to comply with that. After the beginning of the construction, we participated in the steering committee of the project every month, which includes members of ICAM Institute and also other parties. And also there is a physical inspection of the construction site that is a part of this meeting. So the Pact of Integrity fit well in the system of audits, even though we speak about the plurality of controls and audits. And now I'm coming with another inspection, but I think it fits well in the whole system because the Pact of Integrity works also as ex post control, because there is a third-party entity that comes from civil society, but has a privileged approach to the whole system and procedure. Thank you for presentation. And we actually have run out of time, and also the topic of professionalization has already been partly covered, especially about Leona, but I'd like to ask, the recommendation of the European Commission speaks not only about professionalization of contracting authority, but also of those who perform audits and controls. And because the Anti-Monopoly Office started with the awareness campaign and education of law enforcement and judicial bodies, I'd like to ask whether there is an interest from various bodies that the experts from your office would share their experience and whether they participate in EU educational courses organized by the Academy. So I'd like to start with the training of law enforcement bodies. So we organize several training sessions, which were quite useful, because also at the criminal department of the police, there is a specialization required, and there are cases that seem to be simple at first glance, but are not. So we have established a very close cooperation, and if there is a case that is not subject to, it's not actually offense but only an infraction, so it is passed to Anti-Monopoly Office. We also have very intense cooperation with the Ministry of Regional Development, and we of course benefit from it, because at the Ministry for Regional Development there are really high quality staff, and we get really very good quality complaints, and we do not get these complaints only from the Center for Public Procurement, but also from the area of competition regarding cartels, because the people, based on our training, are able to recognize the basic signs of cartels, which is quite unique. In the Czech Republic, the competition and public procurement are covered by one institution, because even our staff, when they assess individual public tenders, they already are able to recognize various indications that something not standard is happening. So there we also do indexing for the budget. We have, for example, indexing of 1.8 or 0.2 compared to another bidder with whom you have made this cartel agreement. But we also communicate with professionals, with non-profit sector that has long been involved in public procurement, is really substantial, because the vast majority of them either participate at these conferences, or they also work as legal counsel representing some of the bodies before the office. So of course, there are various cases I could actually speak about, but what I would welcome more is the cooperation at the level of the central state administrations, where each contracting authorities have to work on their own and do not get support it is especially difficult for the projects that are not standardized, so it is a very difficult job. I would like to say one thing that we introduce at our office when we hire a new employee. They go through an onboarding process, which means that the first months they received proper information from senior officers. They get one case, and this senior employee helps the new employee to go through that, indicates both the malpractice and mistakes on the merit and procedural mistakes and infringements, and after the months they get quite a lot of knowledge. If I compare it to the period when I joined the office, it was very different. So we just want the people to attract to work in for public administration.
Thank you, and I'll give the floor to Leona. I was making notes, and now I'm not sure about to start. As for the Integrity Pact, I'm glad to hear it. It's very important. Whatever if works, it's great. If there are mistakes, then of course everyone keeps telling us that we do it in a wrong way. So it's great if the public participates. They perceive also positive stuff, and not that everyone is desperate from the very beginning, and that we do not communicate. That was a comment which actually is quite unfair. We really try to communicate. We try to focus on quality. I do perceive whatever is missing is. I will talk about it tomorrow. I think it's strategy. We try to have everything incorporated in the legislation. The Czech Republic doesn't have the strategy. These are the data. According to these data, we would like to achieve these goals. We would like to postpone in this way. That's valid also for true for the public tenders. This is what we would like to achieve. This is how we would like to be innovative. This is a wanted result, and I'm sure this will definitely be one of the points where we shall probably overlap and be able to agree. Talking with Martin Hadaš on the topic of public tenders, an audit comes and he tells us, well, I do not understand the public tenders, but I am to audit it. So this is not the right way forward. The auditors have to know not only the legislative framework but also the trends. We have more than we have 200 participants, but one, maybe two auditors in the audience. But these conferences are considered to be sort of additional to the knowledge of legislation. But this is something we have to do, and of course should be integral part of the factual knowledge. So should I give the floor to, we are already over time, but now let's open the floor to the audience, for the audience. In case you would like to ask the question to any of the panelists, feel free to do so, because we should slowly conclude the conference. I can see there is a hand raised at the very left end. Good afternoon, Ječný from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm not going to talk on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but as a representative of a municipality, I would like to extend my thanks to Mr. Mosna, what he was commenting on the municipalities. I want to support municipality in public tenders, and having looked at the results of the elections, there is 1,500 municipalities where they have just one ballot. There is the mayor who has to do all the work. He has to open the public tender, monitor the public tender. In case of any audits and any errors, then the whole municipality blames just this person or very few persons. Does the Ministry of Regional Development plans for a support for minor procurers? Of course, I do not want to be supported by private companies which do charge a lot for processing the public tender. But usually, the mayor has nowhere to go and see what are the models, check if he or she is in compliance with all the requirements. And it's very difficult, there are so many things for some mayors. It's difficult to distinguish transparency, non-transparency, discriminatory, non-discriminatory. What is the ideal profile of the buyer, procurer, simply where to get from some sort of a support when administering public tender. Thank you very much for the question. I will start again with the 6-4. I am to repeat it tomorrow. Seeing Gerhard from Austria, that's where we inspired ourselves primarily. The 6-4 gives us the whole range of possibilities. What aspects could be used? That's what we would like to have a part of national strategy, is a national action plan, which we can see in Austria, which clearly stipulates which goods are the appropriate ones, where it's fruitful, what are the minimum criteria which can be safely used. It's some sort of a document, but on the other hand, it could be guides or leads for any sort of audit. They would say, yes, we understand that you didn't come up with any innovation in legislative services, and the 6-4 was defined and to be implemented wherever it may have impact. Construction sites, purchases of furnishing to the offices, wherever it makes sense. If we have an inspiration abroad, we can be inspired abroad. It could be very helpful if someone uses this particular section or has to use the section. Then, of course, they should be aware of the fact that they don't have necessarily to come up with pseudo criteria. Well, we have discussed with the chairman and the vice chairman for a long period of time that the capacities are limited, both the ministry and the anti-monopoly office. And as for the administrative bodies, we have agreed that the state self-administration be visited and train in the regions what is being changed. In, for example, when a new amendment is approved, we should rather focus on explaining the basic attributes. We don't have to train them how to lead a competitive dialogue, but rather to show them, to educate them in simple models we don't necessarily have to run around and visit all of the municipalities. We should rather have more focused support. If talking about the competences and professionalization, we should focus on large procurers, and when there is a small municipality or small organization, we should focus on the particular problems. So thank you very much. I firmly hope the question was answered. I can see also Martin Reimann.
Tak děkuju. Já bych využil
Thank you. The idea mentioned by Mr. Mosna, or the idea he has said that from the Center for Regional Development, they get some sort of an incentives if there is a suspicion for the cartel agreement. You have mentioned the indexation, for example, that the bids have lots of item prices, and there is only minor difference in the percentage. 8 years back, there was a piece of legislation valid in case there were not submitted at least 2 bids. The whole public tender had to be cancelled, and many of the suppliers were submitting the bids twice, basically. And it happened to us that we have received 2 bids, which were quite alike, probably printed on the same printer. Some inkjet print, strange blue colors, so it was quite obvious to detect the similarity. What the buyer procurer should do if they have a suspicion that the bids are submitted from just the same party, should they submit an incentive to anti-monopoly office than what the anti-monopoly office does? What the procurer should do in such a case, and then I would like to know what you do about it. Thank you very much for the questions. There are situations when the bids may look alike. We will give a particular example. There we have received the same bids, same papers, same mistakes, but later it was proved that they had the same person drafting the budget. He wanted to save the hard work, and he just copied the drafted budget. He just changed some of the items, and or we had one person drafting the budget who purchased the budget from the budget person of the other company. If you have one budget person and you don't prove the coordination of the 2 bodies, so it's not cartel, but of course, if you have a budget person who purchases the data from the other one, that's of course forbidden cooperation. In case there is a suspicion for the same bids, you give the incentive to the anti-monopoly office. Then we are entitled to on-site visits. We may take away any sort of documents which may lead to proof of cartel. Could be computers, mobiles. We can withdraw the data. The WhatsApp signal and other apps. Now one is using it. Now one is using the text messages or mail for exchange of information. If you continue with bid or if you cancel the tender, that's up to you, of course. Then you should also reflect the price, whether the price represents unconventional bid or not. If someone has use, if it complies with the purpose of your public tender, then you can go ahead with it. Then it's up to the monopoly office or the police or the state prosecutor. The advantage of the anti-monopoly office is that we do not have to prove the subjective part of the error, be it intentional or infraction, intentional or unintentional. Intrigues. So the easiest way forward is to give an incentive, and of course we communicate it with whomever has submitted the incentive. We of course do look for further and more detailed information with whoever submitted the incentive.
Thank you very much for all the questions from the audience. I can't see any other. I would like to extend my thanks to the speakers, their answers, their answers to discussion questions. So thank you very much once again, and I like to say goodbye.